Good morning, Minnesota DFLers, and welcome to the DFL Daily. Richard Carlbaum here, chair of the Minnesota Democratic Farmer Labor Party. So great to be with you each and every day, Monday through Friday at 10:45, to make sure you have the message, the action, the tools to be empowered. Before we get into today's topic, let's look at some exciting events happening. So Martin County has their Working Families Picnic in Fairmont. I think Marge Hoffman, the Fantastic, will be down there. Same for Nicollet County, both starting at 5:30 p.m. tonight. Mower County has their working family picnics at 5 p.m. in Austin. And then I will be in North Mankato for a listening session from 6 to 7 tonight. In addition, Crow Wing County has a meet and greet for local candidates at 5 p.m. today in Merrifield. All these events and more can be found at dfl.org/events. Get out and bring someone new if you can. All right, let's get into today's topic. I'm joined today by DFL Press Secretary Brock Lawhead. Brock, welcome to the call.
Hey, Richard, glad to be here.
Awesome.
Today we will be going over this week's message, which is Republicans' broken promises are costing Minnesotans. We know that Republicans promised to lower costs, but instead, Minnesotans are paying more for healthcare, gas, groceries, and everyday necessities. Republicans simply aren't holding up their end of the deal, and their broken promises have made life less affordable for working families. Does that sound familiar? I hope it does. The contrast is what's important. What did Republicans do? How will Democrats move us forward? So here's what's going to be important to get across this week in your events, social media, and conversations at the doors. Richard?
Yes, Republicans promised they had a health care plan. Instead, they voted to make health care more expensive. Minnesota families are paying more to see a doctor, fill their prescriptions, and keep the coverage they need to stay healthy. Republicans promised to keep America out of costly foreign wars. Instead, Trump's new strikes on Iran are pushing oil prices higher and driving another spike in gas prices. Minnesota families have already spent hundreds of dollars more per household on Trump's war of choice that shows no signs of stopping. The costs don't stop at the pump or at the doctor's office. Republicans' agenda has also increased the price of groceries and other necessities, costing households more than $1,000 on average since the start of Trump's war, squeezing family budgets when they're already hurting.
Right. And what's clear is our next point is, which is that the worst is still ahead if Republicans continue down this path. As Trump's conflict overseas continues and the impacts of Republican healthcare cuts are going to be hitting Minnesota mailboxes, families are working harder than ever and dipping into their hard-earned savings to make ends meet. And that's why Minnesota Democrats are fighting to bring your costs down and help your family get a little breathing room. While Republicans break their promises, we're focused on lowering prices and putting working families first. Once again, we're going to drop links here in the chat for our endorsed candidates so you can read and see their plans to bring down costs for working families from housing to healthcare.
That's exactly right, Brock. Great. Let's move into some proof points. Like always, there's a lot. Here are three of the stickiest that I think really tell the story. First, 66% of Americans are worried about being able to afford health care for their family, and 57% say the same about groceries. 67% say that recent increases in gas prices have caused financial hardship for their household. We're going to drop those links in the chat as well.
Wow. I mean, I know we have some like tangible figures on what this is actually going to cost families. What are those looking like?
Well, for example, ACA deductibles have increased to a record 3,000 increased a record $3,786 on average. The ACA deductibles have increased $3,786 on average. ACA monthly premiums are up about $780 on average. That means a family of four making $70,000 is paying $3,182 more on average, which comes out to $265 more a month on average. And get this, because of that, people are just dropping their coverage, making healthcare expensive for everyone else because they can't afford it.
Yeah. Well, and that's just healthcare. How about for gas?
I've been paying attention to the AAA monitor on this thing. I'm
Yeah.
obsessed with it. I can actually pull prices from like Rochester and Mankato and make Brad Finstead's life hell. Americans have spent $56.4 billion more on gas since the start of Trump's unpopular war of choice with Iran, which Finstead, Fishbach, Emmer, and Stauber support. Minnesota families have spent $867 million more on gas. 867 million. That's $403 more per household since the start of Trump's unpopular and unnecessary war of choice with Iran.
Yeah, well, and that brings us to our final proof point here, and maybe one of our most important facts, which is that Americans have spent more than $1,000 per household and 132 billion overall on higher Republican prices for gas, food, and other daily expenses. We're going to put the message memo in the chat again for the more proof points on how Republicans have hiked up your family's costs here. So let's now move into the news stories that back it up.
Awesome. We're going to put these in the chat as well. First off, as the New York Times reports, the Trump administration has lurched back into a war against Iran that had never really ended, which means that according to Reuters, oil prices continue to rise for the fourth day as U.S. strikes on Iran raise fears of a wider conflict. On healthcare, PBS is reporting that middle income Americans straining to pay for Affordable Care Act health insurance are unlikely to get relief next year. And finally, NBC is reporting how grocery prices have changed since Trump took office.
And that just brings us back to one of our first talking points, which was that higher Republican costs are just going to get worse. And that's in contrast to the Democrats that we have endorsed working to bring prices down.
All right, so let's turn this week's message into action. That's always the most important part. Our action today is simple. We're going to drop a link to a bunch of graphics in the chat. Please share those with whatever social media pages you manage, your personal ones, your local units. Please get them out there. And if you don't manage your local units, get them to the person who does so they can do that. And tomorrow, tune in to hear a round of Q&A. We'll drop a link in the chat for that as well. You can ask any question you want, and I will answer it on the call tomorrow. So that's it, folks. That's this week's message memo. Now that you have the message, the action, and the tools to be empowered, thank you for being here today. Have a happy Monday. We'll see you tomorrow. We have 106 days until the November 3rd midterm election. Let's go win this thing.